Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for WLBT Plus. My name is Kara Shirley. I'm your digital news desk host. Shad, I just realized you are really far away from me.
I'll scoot in. How
Scoot
about
in
that?
just a little bit.
There we go.
So we have on the show with us today Mississippi State Auditor Shad White, here to talk about some of what we called your Moj
Moj,
findings.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
It sounds weird, but it was, if you follow him on Facebook, there was a Facebook post where he revealed a lot of details and information on findings that your office has done. But before we jump into that, just for those who may not know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself real
Sure.
quick?
Yeah. I'm Shad White. I'm the state auditor of Mississippi, the 42nd state auditor of Mississippi. I've been in this job for about 6 years now. And really, the mission of the state auditor's office is to look for fraud, waste, and abuse involving government money, so taxpayer funds. And I'm grateful to be in this job. I grew up in a little bitty town in Jones County, 700 people. My dad and my grandfather were oil field pumpers. My mom was a school teacher. So I didn't come from a family that was political or rich or anything like that. And I grew up and wanted to do public service at some point in my life, and found myself in this position 6 years ago, and I'm grateful to get the chance every day to wake up and look for misspending involving taxpayer funds. Doesn't always make all the politicians in Jackson happy when we find something, but I do think it's important and an important function to serve for the taxpayers in Mississippi. Seems like the nation thinks that too now, based on what you're seeing at the federal government level from President Trump and Elon Musk and Doge. And so it's inspiring to see them and some of the work that they're doing, and we get to take some of those lessons learned up there and apply them to Mississippi too.
Awesome. Well, let's talk. And really, before we really jump into the Moj findings and the post that you made on Facebook, let's talk about you asking the Supreme Court to dismiss the case
Sure.
from or the Brett Favre's defamation lawsuit against you. So you had asked the lower court, and it was rejected, and
Right.
you've moved on to the Mississippi Supreme Court.
Right.
Tell us more about that. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, because it's a ridiculous lawsuit. That's why. Just to keep it short, I guess it's a ridiculous lawsuit that's been filed against me, but that's not the only one. You know, I've been sued by the Attorney General. I've been sued by a crazy professor at Ole Miss. It's not the first time this has happened. Legislatures, had bills to strip the state auditor's office of authority. And look, all of these establishment kind of players, they can try this lawfare, which is what this is. They can try this lawfare against me as state auditor to limit the ability of my office to do its job. But we're not going to stop. We're going to keep finding fraud, waste, and abuse, and I'm going to keep telling taxpayers about it too.
Well, let's get into the Facebook post. I want to pop it up on the screen so people can see it if they have not seen it, if they don't follow your Facebook page. Let me get it. Make sure I hit the right button. So here, I just accidentally turned off our microphones, which is not the right thing to do. Definitely not going to hear anything there. So the Facebook post, it says that the state agency, some state agencies were buying TVs for $5,800. Now, is that just one TV, or was it multiple TVs?
That was a set of contracts that state agencies entered into. And if you want a little bit more detail on that, we did this big study specifically looking for waste last year. We called it Project Momentum. It looked at 13 different state agencies in Mississippi, and we looked at everything we could think to look at, from travel costs, how many cars those state agencies had, how much they were paying to insure their office buildings, how much office space they had, did they have too much office space for the number of employees, everything you could think to look at if you were trying to make those agencies more efficient, almost like a business. We looked at it, and one of the more egregious things we found was that some of these state agencies are spending a lot of money on IT equipment, like TVs or mouses or computers or whatever. And one of the more egregious examples, again, was the $5,800 contract per television screen. We actually dug a little bit deeper and we looked at that specific model. And that same model gets purchased by the federal government for a little over $2,000 per TV screen. So if you ever think the federal government is inefficient, you should try looking at the state government of Mississippi. That's the kind of stuff that we're seeing. And at some point, these are really just audits. They're just analyses of how this money is spent. We don't get to change anything from the state auditor's office. It's kind of in the title. All we can do is audit. But at some point, my hope is that policymakers, some of the politicians in Jackson, they'll start to look at this and they'll say, all right, we need to take this seriously, and we need to crack down on some of this kind of waste, because it means that this money is being spent in a way that doesn't benefit normal taxpayers.
When you have here another thing you listed, welfare money going to beauty pageants.
Yep.
Speeding tickets for rich people, community gardens that were never built, a lot of other things, but cell phones that never even get turned on.
Yep. That one was crazy. So we decided, let's look at cell phones that the state government is buying for state employees. Some state employees need a cell phone provided by the government. So if you're a law enforcement officer, you may need a government cell phone. If you're working in emergency management and you got to be on call all the time, you may need a government cell phone. But we wanted to know, all right, we're paying for a bunch of cell phones for state employees. Do they actually use them? And what we found was that in any given year, the state spends about $340,000 on cell phones for state employees, and the cell phones are never turned on. They're used between 0 and 50 minutes per month, a lot of them for 0 minutes. So that's the kind of stuff that, happens in state government unless somebody stands up, looks for it, and calls it out. And then ultimately you hope that somebody will put a stop to all that waste, and we can get this money going to where it matters. $340,000 I know doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start stacking these things up, $5,800 for this contract for TV screens, $340,000 here, $10 million in Medicaid over here. When you start stacking those things up, they add up and can make a real difference in people's lives if that money were instead spent on teachers' salaries or cops' salaries or tax cuts or whatever it may be.
You also have in here where there was millions going to DEI offices that spend money on things like social justice yoga for preschoolers.
Yeah.
What is social justice yoga? And
that is a great question. I have no idea.
Where did this happen at?
That was at Ole Miss. That was at my alma mater, Ole Miss. So I've talked a lot about the cost of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion offices at our public universities. 2 years ago, we did a study and found state taxpayers spend millions of dollars funding these DEI offices at the universities. And when you dig deep, you see that money is not going to, by and large, it's not going to scholarships for kids from poor areas or something like that. It's going to pay salaries of adults. In fact, at Ole Miss, again, where I went to school for college, the head DEI staffer at Ole Miss made more money than the governor of Mississippi and the lieutenant governor of Mississippi combined. And so we wanted to know, all right, well, you got this highly paid staffer. They're surrounded by 20 other staffers in this office. What are they doing? What are they doing all day? What are they doing with our money? Well, one thing we found as an example was they give out grants. And one of the grants was to study social justice yoga for preschoolers. What that is, I have no idea. I mean, we could ask them, I guess, and try to figure out what it is. But that's the kind of stuff when you call it out, normal taxpayers say, whatever that is, that's not a common sense way of spending money. That's what we really need in Mississippi state government is we need to get back to basics. Our universities, for example, need to focus on training the next generation of doctors and nurses and engineers and accountants and all the people that we need for our economy, not this kind of really weird social justice-y agenda garbage. It's just odd. It's odd.
You seem to talk a lot about or against, or however you want to say it, but you seem to be against DEI. When there are a lot of really good aspects of DEI that could be beneficial to people.
Name them.
Name them. Okay.
Name them.
Well, let's see. Well, your children are not, they're of Indian descent, correct?
Sure.
And so wouldn't some of the DEI programs be able to be beneficial to them?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Think about the DEI office at Ole Miss. They're doing training seminars on the dangers of whiteness. How is that good for anybody? That's just divisive. That just divides people. That's the kind of stuff that you actually see in these DEI programs. What we need to get back to is we need to get back to the basics. Those kinds of offices that are led by people who have very odd social views, like we don't need to be using taxpayer funding to prop them up. and then, push that agenda on students and other professors. That's exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing. It doesn't benefit anybody to divide folks by race or whatever it may be. We need to focus on the things that universities should be doing, and that's training the next generation of workers so that our economy can grow in the long run. That's the big thing.
All right. Well, let's talk about with this the Facebook post that you made. Will there be an actual report released on it detailing all of the findings, and when can we expect that?
Those are really the bullet points in each of those, or each of those bullet points really already has a report behind it. So that post that you're mentioning really represents the work of the last 2 or 3 years in the state auditor's office. Unfortunately, when we push stuff like this out, it's a big report. We did a big audit on the spending of welfare money in Mississippi, and it's hundreds of pages long. Most people don't read reports that are hundreds of pages, but if you put it into a Facebook post as a bullet point, then people will read it for the first time. So folks can go to the auditor's office website and they can see evidence behind almost any of those things. But I will tell you this: what we're going to do to make it easy for people is we're going to take the things that I mentioned in that particular post, since it's gotten a good bit of attention, and we're going to assemble all of the reports that we have built over the course of the last few years. We're going to put it together in one big report. It'll be, probably 500 or 600 pages, and it'll put you to sleep at night, right? That just like that. But we're going to put that out here in the next few weeks, and that'll be kind of our unofficial Moj report to people, explaining what we've been doing for the past 2 years and past few years, and it'll tell folks, here are the things that you need to ask your lawmakers about when you're calling them and saying, hey, what are we going to do to get a handle on the waste and the corruption?
And what happens to the funds that are recovered?
So if there's money that's been stolen or misspent, we'll do an investigation, and then we'll typically turn that over to a prosecutor. So we do the fact finding, we do the auditing, but we don't get to haul somebody into court and litigate a whole case against them. So we'll typically take that to a prosecutor if money has been stolen. If the court ultimately finds that person is guilty, then the money that gets recovered goes back to the place where the money was stolen from. So if we called a county supervisor stealing money from a county and that person pleaded guilty and paid the money back, that money would go back to that county, for example.
Well, then let me ask you this question, because there was another post that I saw on your page where you were talking, it was like a question and answer type of thing, and people asking why can't you, or why don't you investigate cities? And you said on there that you can't audit municipalities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Under state law. Do you think that is a law that should be changed so that you should be able to audit cities?
Yeah, and there was a bill last year, not this session, but last year, that would have changed that, and the bill died. So I don't think that the law is going to change anytime soon. That's my guess. But it is true, in state statute, we're prohibited from auditing cities. So the question then is, well, do cities get audited? What happens? Well, the state code, state regulations state that, cities that make above a certain amount of revenue do have to get audited. They just have to go out and they have to hire a private CPA firm to get that audit done.
So the state has to hire the
city.
Yes,
Yep.
I apologize. You're correct. Thank you. The city has to hire the firm to audit themselves.
Correct.
So the city governs themselves in that instance.
Well, what you would have is you're hiring a private CPA firm, and then the CPA is supposed to, they're supposed to uphold CPA independent standards. So they have a license, and they're supposed to do the audit. They're supposed to report fairly on what is happening. And if they get caught not doing their jobs, they can lose their licenses. That's kind of the idea behind a CPA. And so for people who want to read the audit of, say, the city of Jackson, you can go and find that audit. Again, that audit is what most audits are, which is it's written in the language of accounting, and it'll show you over the course of the past several years, there's been a lot of mismanagement at the city of Jackson. Surprise, surprise. But that's the kind of thing that you can find if you look into an audit. It doesn't solve the problems of Jackson, right? An audit is just an autopsy. An audit is saying, this is what happened over here. There's the dead body right there. It's not going to revive anybody. It's not going to change anything. Change has to happen from elected officials who are going in there and they have a strategic plan to make things better, and then they do.
And you say after you do these audits, your office, you can't prosecute the people
Correct.
that you find, but you can arrest them. You can have them arrested. And the reason why I ask you this is
Think about
because,
your. I'll just explain it real fast.
okay.
Think about your sheriff. You're from Lauderdale County, right?
Mhm.
Your sheriff goes out and somebody's burglarized a home. So your sheriff is going to do the investigating, right? And then the sheriff is going to say, I think it's Joe down the street. All right. He's going to go to the DA, the prosecutor. And then the prosecutor is going to look at it and he's going to say, I think you're right. I think Joe is the one who burglarized that home. The prosecutor is going to go before a grand jury. So that's a group of people in Lauderdale County, and then going to get an indictment. That's a sheet of paper. It's called a capias. Prosecutor's now got the indictment. What does he do? Prosecutor doesn't go arrest that person. Prosecutor gives that paper back to the sheriff. Sheriff goes and arrests Joe down the street, brings him back, and then they haul him before the court, and then the prosecutor is going to prosecute him. So in that scenario, we serve the function of the sheriff, basically. We do the investigating when it comes to financial crimes, and then if a prosecutor indicts somebody, then we'll go arrest them.
Okay. Because in your Facebook post, it said that there were special agents from your office. And so that's
kind of like the deputy sheriff, right?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, then that makes sense, because I was wondering, because it's like, well, you can't prosecute them, but you can arrest them, which I understand the difference between prosecution and being arrested. But it was like, so you have this right under state law, but you don't have this
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
How does your investigation process begin? Like, how do you know what's to investigate, who to look at?
Yeah, it's a great question. Most of our good investigations start with a whistleblower tip. So most of them, believe it or not, most of them don't start with an audit. And this is true really nationwide too. There are these statistics put together by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And they have found that most good criminal cases involving government money, public funds, they don't start with an auditor finding something. They start with a whistleblower coming into the auditor saying, hey, you might want to look at that guy over there. He makes a $30,000 salary. He drives a Ferrari, and we got a lot of money missing. And so when we get a tip like that, that usually is what begins a criminal investigation for us.
Are the people aware that they are being investigated, or do they not find out until handcuffs are being put on them?
Usually somebody figures out, because what we're going to do is we're going to gather documents, and sometimes word gets around that we're gathering documents, and then the next phase of an investigation typically is you start interviewing people. So word often gets around that the state auditor's office is interviewing people, and then we would likely culminate that with an interview with the actual subject of the investigation. And so they're not going to wake up one morning and be totally surprised.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Mississippi Corruption Act.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know you're probably excited too. I know the bill that was put out to limit the power of the Mississippi Auditor. Yeah. And there have been a lot of people that say maybe that you are stepping outside of the scope of your responsibilities as auditor. But
they're free to be wrong.
They're free to be wrong. They are free to be wrong. But talk about the bill. I mean, I know that it died, but talk about it for me.
Yeah. So the function of an auditor is to look for fraud, waste, and abuse, right? That's what we do every single day in the auditor's office. And unfortunately, when we find fraud, waste, and abuse, there are some politicians in Jackson who just don't like it. That's just the bottom line. And some of those more establishment types, they get their feelings hurt that we've talked about a program that maybe they like or whatever it may be, but that doesn't stop us. So we keep blazing forward. One of the reactions from, this is a committee chairman in the state Senate, one of the key committee chairmen for Lieutenant Governor Hoseman. One of his reactions to some of the stuff that we were doing, some of the reports that we were writing, was to write this bill, which would have taken away some of our legal authority in the auditor's office. So it would have stopped us from looking for waste. It's kind of an important function for an auditor to be able to look for fraud, waste, and abuse. And somebody could say, well, you're not supposed to be looking for waste. Sorry, that's not what an auditor does. An auditor looks for fraud, waste, and abuse. So it would have taken away our ability to do that. It would have taken away our ability to go to court to try to get some of the money back if we find that money has been misspent. And third, it would have limited our ability to investigate some nonprofits and some for-profits that are receiving government money. So those were the three big things that bill did. And when I first read the bill, nobody contacted my office to say that this bill is being written. We found out, my staff and I found out about this bill late on a Friday night when it plopped on the internet. And so we looked at it, and over the weekend, I thought, surely there's no way this thing is going to pass. And over time, it became clear this bill has a chance of becoming law. This really does. And it sailed through committee on the state Senate side. And I started calling it the Mississippi Corruption Act, because that's what it is. It's a bill that would have made it easier to make our government more corrupt. And that was not a good thing. And so public pressure, I think, at that point built. And this is really not public pressure that I could have generated on my own. Normal people have to care about something in order to see it on the internet and say, yeah, that bothers me. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call my state senator. I'm going to call the lieutenant governor's office and tell them that I don't like this. And so really, at the end of the day, the bill died on the floor of the state Senate because it was killed by the bill's own author. And it died because normal people stood up and they said, that's not a good thing. And so I don't think it was actually a victory of Shad White, the state auditor, over these other folks. I think it was the victory of people over the politicians who wanted to gut the auditor's office.
Are you going to be running for governor?
Well, this has been a fun interview. I appreciate your time. I've made no secret that I'm seriously thinking about running for governor. And part of the reason is all this stuff that we just talked about. You know, I get frustrated that we identify all of this waste, all this brokenness in government, and sometimes something happens. You know, sometimes our reports are taken seriously, and sometimes there are consequences for those people who do these things, but a lot of times there aren't. And so at some point, I think that our voters are going to demand somebody who is going to come in and going to cut the fat out of state government and get the money going to where it actually benefits us. In the same way that the voters demanded that in the last presidential election and elected President Donald Trump. I think he's doing an incredible job, along with Elon Musk and Doge, of actually putting a stop to fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government. And I'm just here to tell you, our voters, normal people, see that, and they're going to want the same thing to happen at the state level, whether it's folks here in Mississippi or Ohio or Alabama or wherever. And so that's what I hear out there, and that's what is motivating me to start talking about what happens next for in the next election cycle.
Next election, which that is 2027.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you still got a lot of time to think about.
Yeah,
it.
there's some runway there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Shad, that I've asked every question, or you've either answered every question that I had, and I didn't even give you the list of them. So I'm very, or maybe you're just so used to the same questions, you know what's coming.
Yeah, a lot of times, and you've asked great questions too, because these are the questions that normal people want to know about. You know, how do I know that my taxpayer money is being safeguarded? How do I know that? And the good thing is we do have an office in Mississippi that's supposed to do this. It's called the State Auditor's Office. Sometimes I call it MOJ just for fun, but this is the office that is doing this right here. There's a critical difference, though, between what you see happening in Washington with Doge and with us. And the critical difference is this: we only have the power to audit. We can't actually cut off the wasteful spending, cut off the contracts in the same way that Doge is doing. But to go back to our last little conversation, I really do believe that taxpayers in Mississippi, they're going to get fed up with this waste at some point. They're going to get fed up with reading about all of the different examples of brokenness in state government, brokenness at our university system. They're going to want us to get back to basics as a state government and start doing the things that government should be doing and doing it well, keeping us safe, educating our kids in the public school system, giving money back to taxpayers by tax cuts when we have found savings. Those are the things that people want, and they're going to demand it over time. If the current crop of politicians can't give it to them, they're going to find somebody who will.
Do the citizens of Mississippi have the ability or even the right to see all of the things that you are auditing?
Absolutely. Yeah. We put it on our website. Yeah. So they can go look at osa.ms.gov, and there's a big search bar there. We try to make that website as easy to navigate as possible. We also put our own contracts online on the internet. So a lot of state agencies don't do that, but anytime we sign a contract with somebody to come in and help us do work, we put that on the transparency part of our website. And so people can see how we're spending money too. There's always that question of, well, who's watching the auditor? Well, you can watch the auditor. We try to be transparent and put our contracts out there. We also get peer reviewed every 3 years. So state auditors from all around the country, not from Mississippi, come to Mississippi and they review what we've been doing. It happens once every 3 years. And so we passed a peer review every single year that I've been auditor. I'm really proud of the work that we've done. We've identified about $400 million worth of waste. We've recovered $75 million worth of misspent government money. And that's more than any other 6-year period in the history of the state. So I love saying that because it gives me a chance to brag on the 130 men and women across the street who are doing this work every day. And I just get to lead that that team and then tell you about the great work that they're doing.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. I also appreciate you promising to give us the exclusive of when you do decide to run for governor. He didn't.
That was a
say
pretty
that.
savvy journalism move right there. I like it.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that. But no, Shad, I do appreciate you coming in and speaking with us
thank you,
today and just kind of explaining a little bit of things and answering some questions that I'm sure a lot of people have.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Well, there is a bad weather on the way. I'm sure all of you are very much aware of this, but make sure that you are here at 2:30 today at WLBT Plus so that you can hear from our First Alert weather team and get the exact timing, or maybe not the exact timing because it is weather and it's out of our control, but get the best that they can tell you timing of what is coming through, when it's coming through, and so you can be better prepared for you and your family. Make sure you're watching 2:30, Shad. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That's a good point.
You guys have a great weekend. Hopefully you all stay safe, be weather aware, download the First Alert Weather app, the WLBT News app, and we will see you on Monday. Bye-bye. My button is not working. How about that?
Oh.
All right, here we go. Y'all have a great weekend. Bye.